The Haunting of Auschwitz. Before we begin, I must warn you. This is not just a story of ghosts. It is not only about shadows that linger or whispers in the dark. It is about a place built not of stone and mortar, but of cruelty, suffering, and silence. A place where screams rose with the smoke, where the air itself seemed to remember, where the ground drank more blood than rain. The world knows the name, Auschwitz, a camp, a factory of death, where human beings were stripped of their names, their dignity, their very breath. Some say the spirits of Auschwitz never left, that those who perished there walk still, seeking not revenge alone, but remembrance. And tonight, you will hear the story of one such family, the Lewinskys. A family torn from their home, broken by fire, yet bound together in death. And you will hear how their shadows rose to haunt the very man who oversaw their end. Listen closely, for in their echoes we may hear not just their past, but warnings for our future. This is their story. Chapter 1. The Rising Darkness. Europe. Late 1930s. The world was changing, not with the sound of gentle progress, but with thunder. The thunder of marching boots, of banners unfurling, of orders shouted in a harsh, guttural tongue. Across Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, city after city fell silent as the black cross of the swastika was raised. With it came new laws, new rules, new enemies. Children in schools were told to point at the yellow star in their textbooks. This is the Jew, the teachers said. This is the parasite. Shops owned for generations, painted with the word unrein, unclean. Synagogues burned. Neighbors whispered. Friends turned away. And then, the yellow star, sewn onto every Jewish chest, not a badge of honor, but a mark of shame, a mark that said, "You are no longer human." In Krakow, Poland, one such family lived, the Lewinskys. Jakub Lewinsky, 45, a man of trade, a merchant of fine fabrics, silks, linens, threads from faraway lands. He had built his shop with his own hands, his reputation with his own word. He walked tall, serious, but when he smiled, when he smiled, his eyes crinkled and softened like a father's embrace. His wife, Anna, graceful as spring, strong as winter, her voice could hush storms. Her bread, her soups, every neighbor swore she cooked with something more than flour and herbs. Perhaps with love too deep to measure. David, 17, tall like his father, but with dreams much taller. He sketched bridges, towers, arches, whole cities in the corners of his notebooks. He wanted to be an architect. He wanted to build things that would outlast war. Samuel, 15, quieter, thoughtful, always with a notebook clutched to his chest. Words spilled out of him like water, poems, prayers, scraps of stories. Once, in those early days, he wrote, "Even shadows need light to exist." And little Rivka, 11 years old, her laughter rang through their small home like bells. She carried everywhere a rag doll, its button eyes loose, its stitched hair fraying. Her father called it her twin. She called it Miriam. They were not rich, but they were respected. They were loved. They were whole. Until September 1939, the day the tanks came. The earth trembled as metal beasts rolled through Krakow's streets. German soldiers marched, their rifles glinting under a cold sky. Shops smashed open, windows shattered. Shouts, screams, gunfire. And overnight, the Lewinsky's life unraveled. Their shop was seized, their friends no longer waved. Even their neighbors crossed the street, afraid to be seen greeting them. Every day, new rules. Jews cannot own businesses. Jews cannot walk in certain parks. Jews cannot ride certain buses. Jews cannot breathe without permission. The Lewinskys endured, until one night, a knock, hard, sharp, against the wood of their door. Jakub froze. Anna's breath caught. David and Samuel exchanged a glance. Little Rivka squeezed her doll. The knock came again, louder, the handle rattled. Jakub opened it. 2 German soldiers stood there, helmets low, rifles raised. Their words were short, clipped, cold. Pack. 10 minutes. 10 minutes to pack a lifetime. Jakub grabbed a single suitcase. Anna folded 2 blankets, her hands shaking. David tried to lift everything at once, his young strength betraying his panic. Samuel stuffed his notebook under his coat. And Rivka? Rivka clutched Miriam the doll, whispering to it as though it could answer. The soldiers shoved them out into the night. The street was lined with others, neighbors, children, old men, all herded like cattle. And at the end of the road, a train. But not a train for people, a train for cargo, for animals. The Lewinskys were pushed inside, the door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed them. There was no air, no space. Bodies pressed against bodies, the stench of fear, of sweat, of urine. Hours passed, then days. The strong tried to hold up the weak collapsed. Each stop of the train, the doors opened and silence fell, as the dead were dragged out and tossed aside. Anna whispered prayers until her voice broke. David tried to steady his father's shoulders, whispering, "Papa, we will be home again." Samuel scratched lines into his notebook, though the train jolted with every turn. "They treat us like shadows," he wrote. "But shadows can outlast the light." And Rivka sang to her doll, a trembling lullaby, broken by sobs. After eternity, the train screeched to its final stop. The doors burst open. Cold air stabbed their lungs. Searchlights blinded their eyes. Dogs barked, straining on leashes. German voices shouted commands. The Lewinskys stumbled onto frozen ground. Jakub held Anna's hand. David pulled Samuel close. Rivka clung to her mother's dress. And then they saw it. The gate. The iron arch. Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. A lie. A cruel, cruel lie. They had arrived at Auschwitz. Chapter 2. Life in the Shadow of Death. The Lewinskys had stepped into another world, a world with no dawn, a world where the sun rose, yet warmth never came. The first thing Jakub noticed was the smell. Not smoke, not wood, not the earth, but something thicker, oily, heavy. A smell that clung to the skin, crawled up the nose, sat like a stone in the stomach. Later, he would learn, it was the smell of burning flesh. But on that first night, he did not know. He only held his family tighter. The prisoners were lined in rows. A man in a crisp black uniform strode past them. Impeccable boots, cold eyes. A riding crop tapping against his palm. His voice was sharp like a whip. Left, right. Left, right. Families torn apart in seconds. Children pulled from mothers. Fathers pushed away. Cries echoed. Hands stretched out in desperation and fell short. The Lewinskys, by some twist of fate, were sent to the same barracks, but their relief was bitter. For what awaited them inside was worse than death itself. The barracks were long wooden huts, packed with bunks 3 levels high. No mattresses, only straw. The air was thick with lice, fleas, and sickness. Anna clutched Rivka close. The little girl whispered to her doll, its button eye now loose, hanging by a thread. David and Samuel lay on the hard boards, their young faces already hardening into masks of silence. Jakub sat at the edge, a father who could protect no one. At dawn, the shouting began. Aufstehen! Raus! Out! Out! Prisoners stumbled into the freezing air, rows upon rows. The roll call began. They stood for hours, boots pacing in front of them. Anyone who swayed, who stumbled, a rifle butt cracked against their skull. Or worse. The weak were carried away. The sick disappeared. And still the roll call went on, hour after hour. By the time it ended, their toes were numb, their lips blue, their hearts hollow. Jakub was sent to the labor yard. His hands, once soft from counting silks, were torn open by bricks, by stone, by whips. His back bent, his skin split, yet the guards shouted only one word. Faster! David, too, was dragged to work. His dreams of building towers, mocked by the walls he was forced to build now. Walls not to protect, but to imprison. Samuel, the thoughtful one, was ordered to shovel ash, day after day. Ash that fell from the chimneys, from the smoke above. He never asked what it was. He knew. Deep inside, he knew. Anna and Rivka remained in the women's section. Their labor was different. Scrubbing floors, carrying buckets, endless lines for bread so thin, water so foul, that even the rats turned away. But at night, when Rivka shivered, Anna sang. A lullaby, quiet, almost broken. The same lullaby she had sung at home. Her voice trembled, but she sang. And Rivka clutched her doll, her little fingers raw with cold, her eyes wide, asking questions no child should ask. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The Lewinskys still clung together, but Auschwitz had a way of stripping hope, of devouring it bite by bite. Jakub grew gaunt, his ribs sharp beneath his skin. His eyes, once steady, flickered like a dying flame. David tried to keep strength for his brother, but one night he confessed to Samuel, I can no longer dream of buildings. All I see are walls. Samuel wrote still, his words tiny, scribbled in secret on scraps of paper. He hid them under loose boards, as if the world might one day read them. If you find this, know we lived, know we loved, know we were more than shadows. And Rivka, sweet Rivka, her laughter was gone. Only silence now, and the soft sound of her doll's cloth dragging against the floor. And then the day came. A rumor whispered through the barracks. Selections. Tonight, At dusk, they were ordered out again, lined before the guards, the same cold officer, the same riding crop. He walked slowly, eyes scanning, finger pointing. Left, right, left, right, life, death. When he reached Rivka, her small frame trembling beside Anna, he paused. His eyes narrowed. His hand twitched. Jakub stepped forward. "No, please, she is strong. She can work." A rifle slammed into his chest. He collapsed, gasping. David and Samuel clutched each other. Anna screamed. And Rivka was pulled away, her doll tumbling into the dirt. That night, the barracks fell silent. Silent, except for Anna's sobs and Samuel's scratching pen. They took our light. But shadows remain. We remain. In the weeks that followed, one by one, the Lewinskys were lost. Anna grew weaker, her voice fading until even lullabies would not come. Jakub collapsed at the labor yard and was dragged away, never to return. David and Samuel clung to each other until the day Samuel's notebook slipped from his frozen hands. David held it close, the only piece of his brother he had left. And finally, David too was gone. The Lewinskys entered Auschwitz as 5. They left it as smoke. But smoke has a way of lingering, of curling back through cracks, of haunting those who breathe it in. And the story of the Lewinskys was only just beginning. Chapters 3. The First Haunting. The Lewinskys were gone, burned, scattered, turned into ash and smoke. But Auschwitz did not forget them. And Auschwitz did not sleep. At first it was small things. A soldier on night patrol swore he heard a child's laugh, faint, delicate, carried on the wind. Another reported seeing a doll, a ragged little doll, lying in the snow outside the women's barracks. But when he bent to pick it up, it vanished. The men laughed it off. Fatigue, drink, shadows playing tricks. But shadows, in Auschwitz, were not tricks. One night, a guard named Heinrich was posted at the fence. The moon was thin, the air sharp. His boots crunched in the frost as he paced. And then he saw her. A girl, no more than 11. Dark braids falling to her shoulders, a rag doll dangling from her hand. She stood just beyond the fence, silent, watching. Heinrich raised his rifle. "Zurück!" he barked. "Back!" But she didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even blink. Her lips parted, and in a voice thin as smoke she whispered, "Where is my mother?" Heinrich froze. His throat clenched. His finger slipped from the trigger. And then she was gone, vanished into the mist. He stumbled back to the barracks, pale as death. He told no one. But by morning, everyone knew. Because Heinrich was found dead. His body slumped against the wire fence. His face twisted in terror. His eyes wide, staring at nothing. And in his hand, a rag doll. Its button eye torn loose. Its cloth smeared dark with blood. The officers barked orders, shouted that it was nonsense, a coincidence, a soldier too weak to serve. But whispers spread. The prisoners whispered it first. The Lewinskys walk at night. The little girl seeks her family. And soon Even the guards muttered it under their breath. Then came the play. It was rare, almost unheard of, but sometimes, for reasons no one understood, the command allowed prisoners to perform. A show, a mockery of art, something to amuse the officers, to prove the prisoners were still human enough to sing, to dance, to act. And so in the cold barrack hall, a stage was set. Crude planks, lanterns flickering, rows of benches where German guards sat smirking. The prisoners, thin as skeletons, dressed in rags, stepped forward to perform. They sang, they danced. Their hollow voices echoed like ghosts already. But that night, something else performed. In the middle of a song, one guard began to cough, then choke. His body convulsed. His chair toppled. Another guard rushed to him, only to scream as deep red lines carved themselves into his chest, as though claws, unseen claws, were tearing him open. Panic erupted. The prisoners froze, too stunned to move. The guards shouted, drew weapons, but the air was thick with whispers. A lullaby, soft, familiar. Anna's lullaby. It drifted from the stage, though no prisoner's lips moved. The lanterns flickered, the shadows stretched, and in the wavering light, 5 figures appeared. A man, a woman, 2 young men, and a little girl clutching her doll. The Lewinskys. David's eyes hollow. Samuel's notebook clutched to his chest. Jakub's shoulders bent beneath invisible labor. Anna's lips moving in song. And Rivka. Oh, Rivka. Her doll's button eyes glinting. They stared at the soldiers, silent, unblinking. Then, chaos. One soldier was dragged screaming into the shadows. Another fell, his throat torn open, though no blade touched him. Blood sprayed across the wooden stage. The prisoners cried out, but the guards could not stop it. One by one, soldiers dropped, their bodies twisted, broken, half-eaten, as though by unseen jaws. And when the lanterns shattered, when the hall went black, the only sound that remained was a child's laughter. By dawn, the barrack was silent. The floor was stained dark. The surviving guards sat trembling, their rifles useless in their hands. The commandant stormed in, red with fury, shouting that it was sabotage, a plot, an illusion. He executed 5 prisoners at random. Their bodies dropped in the snow. The survivors were warned, "Speak of ghosts, and you will hang." But it did not matter, because every man who was there that night knew the truth. The Lewinskys had returned, and Auschwitz would never be the same. Chapter 4. The Curse Spreads. The play was over. The stage stood empty. The floor still stained with blood. But the real performance had only just begun. In the days that followed, whispers filled Auschwitz like smoke. The guards spoke less, their laughter gone. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind made their hands clutch rifles tighter. Prisoners whispered too, not of hope, not of liberation, but of shadows. The Lewinskys walk at night. It began with sounds, bootsteps in the empty yard, whispers in Polish and Yiddish, though no prisoner dared to speak after dark. Then came objects. A rag doll, found on a bunk in the guards' quarters, moved from one bed to another, though no one touched it. A notebook, placed neatly on a desk, its pages filled with words no prisoner could have written. Poems in a child's hand, signed with a single name: Samuel. Then came the deaths. One guard was found by the fence, his throat torn open, his body half-eaten as though wolves had descended. But there were no wolves in Auschwitz. Another vanished from his post. They found him the next day, hanging upside down from the rafters of a barrack, his eyes plucked clean from his skull. The guards trembled. They whispered prayers they had once mocked. But prayers could not stop the Lewinskys.
The commandant, Rudolf Weiss, grew furious. He could not allow fear to take his camp, not here, not in the heart of his kingdom of death. He ordered roll calls doubled, curfews tightened, and when soldiers muttered of ghosts, he dragged prisoners into the yard and shot them one by one, 10, 20, 30 at a time. Their bodies dropped into the snow. The message was clear: fear the living, not the dead. But the killings continued. Weiss began to unravel. At night, he heard whispers in his office, the scrape of a pen, the rustle of pages turning, and when he looked, Samuel's notebook sat on his desk, though he had ordered it burned. He threw it into the fire, but by morning, it was back, open, and a new line written inside: even shadows need light to exist. Weiss's dreams grew worse. He dreamt of Rivka standing at the foot of his bed, her doll's button eyes watching him. He dreamt of Anna's lullaby, sung in his wife's voice, until he woke with tears on his cheeks. Once he dreamt of David and Jakub building walls around him, brick by brick, sealing him inside, until there was no air left, no light. He woke gasping, his throat raw, the smell of ash in his nose. The soldiers grew mutinous. Some begged to be transferred, others tried to desert. Most simply vanished. One patrol of 6 men never returned. When search parties went out, they found only their rifles, lined neatly in the snow. Another guard shot himself in the head, screaming that the little girl would not stop singing. And all the while the prisoners grew restless. Some whispered that justice had come. Others prayed the spirits would free them next. A few began to laugh in the guards' faces. Mad laughter, hope, twisted into hysteria. Weiss could not bear it. He sat in his office, a pistol on his desk, his eyes red with sleeplessness. He wrote in his journal, "The camp is cursed. I hear them in the walls. I see them in the smoke. I cannot tell shadow from man, dream from waking. They are everywhere. They want me, and I cannot escape." One night, Weiss fled his office. He staggered into the yard, boots crunching the frost, breath steaming in the air. The camp was silent, too silent. And then he saw them, 5 shadows, walking across the yard, side by side, hand in hand. The Lewinskys. They did not run. They did not hide. They simply walked straight toward him. Weiss drew his pistol, fired once, twice, 3 times. Bullets cracked through the night. But the shadows did not fall. They only drew closer. "Why do you fear the dead?" Anna's voice hissed in his ear. "When you should fear what you have done." Weiss spun. No one there. Only the cold. Only the dark. The next day, Weiss requested transfer. "Anywhere but here," he begged. "Berlin, Munich, even the front lines." His superiors mocked him at first, but when more reports came of vanished soldiers, of broken bodies, they relented. Weiss left Auschwitz within the week. As he stepped into his car, he did not look back at the camp, but he felt it, the weight of 5 pairs of eyes, watching, following. And he knew the curse was not bound to Auschwitz. It was bound to him. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Rudolf Weiss left Auschwitz in the dead of winter. The snow fell thick on the tracks as his train pulled away from the camp. He told himself the horrors were behind him, that the shadows could not follow, that his home, his family, would protect him. But curses do not respect fences, and ghosts do not stay buried. Weiss returned to his home in Dresden, a fine house, 3 stories, with red brick walls and tall windows that looked out on the city streets. His wife, Clara, greeted him at the door. She was surprised. He had not written he was coming. But she did not question it. She embraced him. For the first time in months, Weiss felt warmth. His children, 2 boys and a girl, ran to him. They asked of his work. He lied. He said it was dull, nothing of interest. He told stories of discipline, of soldiers, of order, but never of screams, never of smoke, never of shadows. That night, he sat at his dining table, candlelight dancing against polished wood. His wife's cooking filled the air. His daughter played the piano softly in the parlor. And for a moment, just a moment, Weiss let himself believe. But the Lewinskys were already inside. The first sign came in the hallway. Clara had placed a vase of flowers on the side table. Roses, bright red. But the next morning, they were gone. In their place was a rag doll, old, worn, its button eyes staring blankly. Clara scolded the children, thought it a cruel joke, but Weiss knew better. He threw the doll into the fire, watched the fabric blacken, watched the button eyes melt. And the next morning, the doll was back, sitting neatly on his pillow. The hauntings grew bolder. At night, Weiss heard footsteps pacing outside his door. He would fling it open. Nothing there. Only his children asleep. Sometimes he heard singing, a lullaby carried down the hall. The same one Rivka Lewinsky had once sung to her daughter, before the gas chamber claimed her breath. Clara awoke one night to find Rudolf sitting upright in bed, his eyes wide, his skin drenched with sweat. "They're here," he muttered. "They've come for me." But Clara saw no one, only shadows stretching long against the walls. One evening, Weiss tried to reclaim normalcy. He insisted on a family dinner. The table was set with roast goose, bread, and wine. He told stories of his youth, laughing too loudly, drinking too much. But then, a sound, a soft tap, 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 from beneath the table. The children froze. Clara frowned. Weiss slowly leaned down, and there, crouched in the dark, was the figure of a boy, thin, pale, eyes hollow. It was Samuel Lewinsky. Weiss cried out, overturning his chair. The figure vanished, but in his place, the roast goose lay torn open, its insides raw and crawling with maggots. The children screamed. The lights flickered, and when they returned, 5 shadows stood at the far wall. The Lewinskys, hand in hand, watching. Weiss fell to his knees, his voice breaking. "Leave them alone! It is me you want! Me!" But the shadows did not answer. They only stared. Weiss locked himself in his study. He drank. He ranted. He wrote page after page in his journal, pleading with the spirits, bargaining, offering names, confessing murders, blaming his superiors. But the hauntings did not cease. He saw Anna in the mirror, her face pale, lips blue, eyes sunken with death. She whispered, "You stole my last breath." He smashed the mirror, but her reflection lingered in the shards. He saw David and Jakub at the window, their faces pressed to the glass, their hands smeared with blood. He saw Rivka in his wife's place in bed, her arms cold, her lullaby chilling his spine. One stormy night, Weiss woke to silence. No whispers, no footsteps, only silence. He crept through the halls, pistol in hand, searching. The house was dark, too dark. He entered the parlor and froze. His family sat at the dining table, Clara, his sons, his daughter. But they did not move. They did not breathe. Their eyes were open, glassy, lifeless. And across from them sat the Lewinskys, all 5. Weiss fell to his knees, sobbing, screaming. "Why? Why them? They are innocent!" Rivka's voice filled the room. "Innocent, just like us." The shadows rose, their faces hollow, their hands outstretched. They closed around him. He felt their fingers like iron on his skin. He felt their breath, cold as the grave. Weiss screamed. He begged, but the sound was swallowed in the dark. The Lewinskys dragged him down, down into the shadows, down into the silence. And when morning came, the house was empty. No Weiss, no family. Only 5 chairs pulled neatly from the table, as though a meal had been shared. The house in Dresden still stands. Neighbors say it is cursed. They speak of a family who vanished in one night, of whispers in the walls, of a piano that plays when no one sits at its keys. But some say the curse did not end there, that the Lewinsky's shadows still walk, not just in Dresden, not just in Auschwitz, but wherever cruelty is sown. Perhaps they walk among us even now, waiting for the moment we turn away, the moment we forget. Because the dead never forget.